Hi friends, it's Lola and today I'm going to show you how to shade in Grayscale and I will walk you through how I get from this to this. Painting in Grayscale helps us concentrate on values without worrying about what colors to pick. This skill sets the stage for depth and realism, and once you've mastered Grayscale shading, you can just throw in the colors, which I already have a tutorial for it here. You must be sick of this legendary sphere, so I'm gonna keep it short. Basically, what's closer to the light source will be brighter than the areas where the light doesn't reach. There should be bounce light coming from the ground or other objects near your main subject, unless the sphere is in the void. Light behaves differently based on the surfaces it illuminates. Smoother and less reflective surfaces, like skin, result in a smaller range of values, whereas rougher or more reflective surfaces, like metal, have a broader range. Additionally, the intensity and distance of the light source influence how it interacts with the subject. And to help us studying this, we need a reference. Let's turn this photo into Grayscale and analyze. It looks like the light comes from the right side of the photo, and this is where the light shines directly on her, which means that the areas where the light doesn't reach will be the darkest, and there's also bounce light in these areas. With our sketch here, I'm going to use the lasso tool, pick the mid-tone color for each part, and start creating the flat color layers. You can create one big layer that covers the whole subject and then have clipping mask layers on top where you add different values for different parts, or you can just separate layers like how I do it here. Let's start with the skin first. I went ahead and alpha locked the layers so whatever I paint on won't go outside of that shape, and then I pick a flat brush and start laying out the basic shading first. I chose this brush because it gives me a nice range of values based on the pressure I put into the pen. I can also build up the values by painting over the same areas again to make it darker. With a shade darker than our midtone, I lightly brush over the areas where the light doesn't reach. For deeper shadow areas, I pick an even darker shade and brush over those areas to build up that shadow. We'll now use the airbrush as a smudge tool to start blending those harsh edges together. Be mindful about how you use this tool. You don't want to overly blend and lose all the details that you created. I like to keep the tool a little bit small so I can control where it smudges better. I kept my brush relatively huge for the general shadow, but when I work into the details, I will make my brush smaller just to make the lines more precise. Let's create a layer on top of what we just did and set it to clipping mask. You can either keep this layer to normal or you can change it to add. It's up to you. Then I paint over the brighter part of the subject, considering that even in well-lit areas, not all surfaces share the same value due to facial contours. That's why we need to be mindful about where to brush the light and how much light to add in these areas. And to fine-tune, you can use the eraser tool to gently remove excess brightness. We might lose some details here, but don't worry, the next step will solve this problem. Let's create another clipping mask layer above and set this to multiply. I used the airbrush to carefully go over the details that were missing, like these lines on her nose, her eyelid lines, and just adding more shadow here and there according to the reference. I also brushed over some parts that were overly brightened by the light layer before this, and here's a quick comparison. Of course, I have to add these bling bling sparkling highlights to her face, and now we can work on the hair. I already have a tutorial for hair, so you can check that out for a step-by-step instruction. But basically, hair is a more reflective material comparing to the skin, so there will be more contrast going on there. Similar to what I did with the skin layer, I added the shadow first, and then use a darker color with a smaller brush to create the sectioning and details. And then on a separate layer, I use a brighter color to paint over the bright area where the light shines on the hair. I also use the smudge tool with the hairbrush to brush over her bangs a little to kind of soften those edges and make them look a bit more natural. For other parts like clothes or jewelry or metal, whatever, I like to use the flat brush to work on those details and textures like what I'm doing here. I also have to use the eraser tool to carve out those shapes of her top, and then I just lightly brush over the area when it's brighter or darker. I didn't want to stress too much about the details for this part, so I kind of kept it simple. Now that we're almost done, I go back to the older layers that we created earlier and just refine it a little if needed. And I would also use the Liquify tool and flip the canvas to fix a few proportions. And that's it. I hope you find this tutorial somewhat helpful, and thank you so much for watching. If you watched all the way here, I love you. If you want to know how to paint from grayscale to color, please check out this video over here. Have a great rest of your day and Happy New Year! Bye!